Hey, what's up, Spartan Nation, and welcome to another episode of the Spartan Nation Podcast. Here with your host Matt Lonsberry and my co-host Aiden Mulcrone. Yeah, plenty to get into today. We're bursting at the seams with content to talk about, just because we just came back from Big Ten Media Days in Indianapolis. Aiden was able to join me down there in Indy for on Wednesday when Michigan State, Mel Tucker and Trey Mosley, JD Duplain, Cal Halliday were there. Just talking about the upcoming season. And so, yeah, we got to hang out a little bit and get some work done there and just kind of take it all in. It was Aiden's first trip to Big Ten Media Day. So I guess start off with that, Aiden. What was the trip like and that experience for the first time?
Yeah, no, it's definitely it was definitely a great experience. I really enjoyed my time in Indy and not just seeing Michigan State, but the Big Ten as a whole, seeing all those coaches there. I mean, walking past, guys like Marvin Harrison and JT Tuimalu and seeing those big name guys you see on TV every weekend, like, Brad Nessler, and you see guys like Gary Danielson and
Yeah,
Joel Klatt and all of those media and TV, stars. That's definitely an experience to be had for sure.
yeah. No, I mean, last year was my first experience, so I'm
Mhm.
fairly new to the scene too. And I remember just being like, man, this is really cool. Just to be, for one thing,
Right,
you're standing on the field of an NFL football stadium. The
right.
stands are all around you. You know the names, the Marvin Harrison seniors up on the in the Ring of Honor. And then like you said, just the all the different personalities that you see walking around and you're kind of rubbing shoulders with. Just a really cool experience. And yeah, we had a great time. And like I said, plenty of topics to talk about coming out of that uh, event. Mel Tucker talked about the quarterback battle a little bit. Talked about adding depth and size at the defensive and offensive lines. Um, just a variety of talk. I mean, he reacted to the Northwestern hazing stuff and how that it from what he said, it didn't really impact the way Michigan State does things because they feel like they had that pretty buttoned up. So just a lot of a variety of topics. He even mentioned Deion Sanders, who is taking over at Colorado this year, and obviously Mel Tucker spent a year at Colorado. So variety of topics, but we're going to start with one that has just gotten a lot of attention over the last 24 to 48 hours, and that's NBC announcing that the Michigan State game will be played at night at Spartan Stadium. It'll be broadcast by NBC, and it's just give our reactions to it. So, Aiden, I guess when the news broke, as we're kind of in the middle of media days, I can't remember if it was during like the podium sessions with the coaches or if we were getting ready to interview Mel Tucker or when it exactly dropped. But right there at media days, the news drops and then we're asking Mel Tucker about it. We're asking um, the players about it for their takes. And I guess let's start with Mel Tucker's kind of response to some of the questions that he got. So to kind of catch people up, Mel Tucker was asked about how he felt about it being a night game, and his answer was pretty succinct. He said, "We'll be there, and we're ready to go." I will say his demeanor changed a little bit when this topic kind of got brought up. He was pretty laid back throughout the day, but then when he started talking about Michigan and the rivalry game, there was you kind of sit up a little straighter, and it's a little more business like attitude, and the intensity kind of came out a little bit, and I loved that. I love that you can it's evident and clear that that game is uber important both to Mel Tucker and the players. Just the way that they get down to business when answering questions that come to it. He was asked about how do you tone down the rivalry now that after what happened last year with the tunnel and even going back to 2018 before Mel Tucker was here with the Devin Bush thing in midfield. Is there a way to rein in the rivalry? And he said, I don't think so. I don't know how you do that because they put such an emphasis on the game. Um, and so I guess like what was your reaction to how what Tucker had to say about the rivalry game? And I know you were over there with JD Duplain. I'm sure he got asked a question or two about it. So what was your reaction to those things?
Yeah, I mean, for Tucker, I think it's valid. How do you rein it in? There's only one part of this, because you have MSU's side, and that's only the part that Tucker can control, and then you
Right.
have Michigan's side. So, you have to have both teams really comply for that to rein it in, and I don't think either teams really want to comply or compromise. And for how much you've seen on Twitter and how much you've seen on social media about Michigan fans and Michigan players kind of devaluing the rivalry and saying how much more important that Ohio State Michigan rivalry is,
Sure.
they still get really fired up for that Michigan MSU rivalry. They still get fired up for MSU too. So, his question, I mean, posing the question to the question of how do you rein it in is valid. I probably would have said the same thing, because he can only control his team. He can't control, Michigan and the way that their culture is. He can only control the culture of MSU. So I think that's valid. And Duplain said the same thing when asked about the night game, and he said, "We'll be there, 6 a.m. or midnight. They'll be there playing that game." And Michigan would probably have the same mentality. So
Sure.
I think the night game, just from a fan perspective, I think that's great for MSU. I remember, the Oregon game in 2015. That was a big night game. That was a top five matchup, I think, or if it wasn't top five, it was top 10, and that was one of the best environments that I've seen as a fan sitting in there. And then obviously the Michigan State game from 2021, and it was a noon game that was cloudy, but I think a night game shows the level of importance that Michigan State values this rivalry as. And I think they've I don't remember the last time they've had a night game in East Lansing for this. I think this potentially is the first time ever. I'm not entirely sure that this is the first time
Spartan
it being a
Stadium.
7. Yeah,
Yeah, I think this might be the first ever uh, game that's going to kick off at night at Spartan Stadium. I think
right.
there's been maybe one or two in Ann Arbor that have
Mhm.
kicked off 7 p.m. or later, but I do think this is the first one in East Lansing. Um, just like from a game perspective, I like it. I mean, I like you said,
Mhm.
like it's really cool that there's going to be a giant spotlight on this game, in prime time. I think this is one of the better rivalries in college athletics, much less college football. I mean, if you throw the basketball rivalry in there too, which I think has been really good in recent years. So yeah, I think it's awesome that there's going to be a massive spotlight on this game. And obviously, like going back to the intensity of the rivalry and not being able to rein it in. I mean, all you can do as a coaching staff, as the leaders of the player leaders on the team, is all you can do is control your position group, in your team. Like, there's a difference
Right.
between getting mentally prepared and focusing and using your rival as a form of motivation, of circling that game and going out on the field and just laying it all on the line in that game because it's that important. Um, if that's what happens and there's a little chippiness on the field, that's fine. Like, that's not a big deal. In fact, as a college football fan, I don't mind when there's a little bit of chippiness back and forth. I think it adds to it. I mean, it means something to both players. Now, obviously, we none of us who's in their right mind wants to see what happened at the end of last year's game happen again. Nobody does on either side of the rivalry, if you're in your right mind. So, um, I think that moving on to your other point about Michigan's players and how seriously they were taking it. I think that's shifted even in the last couple of years as well. I think even if you go back to like the Kirk Cousin days when he goes 4-0 against Michigan, Connor Cook had a lot of success against Michigan. the Mark D'Antonio era, especially those first 8 or 9 years when Michigan State reeled off 7 of 8 or whatever that stretch was. Um, and people said, or Michigan State people said, now they've got to take us seriously because we're kicking their tails, year in and year out. And so
Mm-hmm.
you better take us seriously or we're going to keep beating you. And I don't think Michigan fans liked that very much. I think they got used to Michigan State, frankly, being little brother and just kind of plowing through that game and not a big deal. But like, yeah, you've got to take it seriously. And just some of the ways that both Jim Harbaugh and the players last year and this year answered questions about Michigan State, I think has been different. When Jim Harbaugh lists the team goals, it's beat Michigan State, beat Ohio State, win the Big Ten, win the national championship. Michigan State's included in that. Blake Corum echoed those that same list of goals leading up to Big Ten Media Days, and then maybe even repeated it at Big Ten Media Days too. So it is important to Michigan now, and that's what Michigan State wanted to do during the Mark D'Antonio era, is make this game matter, and they accomplished that feat. As far as the intensity, we talked about the intensity on the field. Now we're going to kind of shift gears and talk about Mike Valenti's comments on 97 Won the Ticket. For those of you who didn't hear what Valenti said, go search it on YouTube after our show. Hang out with us for a little bit longer first, but go check out what he said. But the gist of it was he kind of issued a warning to Michigan fans and said, don't be there, because the gist of his thing was, he's a Michigan State alum, and he said, I know how Spartan fans feel after last year, and basically said that feeling for 365 days is going to be reflected on to Michigan fans on that night. And I think his direct quote was, "You might catch a battery in the head" or something like that, like almost indicating that there's going to be violent acts around the stadium, maybe even in the stadium. He compared it to going to an Eagles game, Philadelphia Eagles game, which is kind of notorious for opposing fans to get a lot of crap when you go to these other stadiums. So here's my take on the Valenti discussion. Um, I gotta get his shtick. Like his whole thing is like he's trying to create content. Like he's trying to get, and he accomplished that because everybody's talking about it. I think it short sells Michigan State fans a little bit though. Like to act like Michigan State fans are foaming at the mouth, ready to pounce on any Michigan fan who comes near the stadium. I don't think that's accurate. I don't think that's the mentality of 90 to 95%. Maybe that's probably lowballing the percent of fans that attend games, go to games, spend their money on games. So that's my take on it. Is I think it's a little bit hype. It's funny. He led the segment with, "This is not hyperbole," and I think it was absolutely hyperbole. I think it was very hyperbolic. Um, and that's not to say that Michigan State fans and the players and the coaches don't want to get after Michigan, because they absolutely do. Like, how could you not in normal circumstances, much less after what happened last year, after having to deal with suspensions and all of that and the criminal charges that came from that, which that's a different show for a different day. And I think that topic's been beaten to death last year anyway, so we're not going to get into it. But I just think that it kind of short sells Michigan State fans that they're going to react that way. And react with violence. I think that's overblown a little bit. What was your reaction to it when you heard Valenti's take, Aiden?
I think it's a little silly that just like he thinks everyone in the stadium are, heathens or something. And
Yeah,
if you're buying those tickets, I mean, MSU, that's always the most expensive ticket on the slate every season, is that Michigan game. I mean, I remember in 2021, people were, student tickets are around, I can't remember, like $170, and people were, that's for the whole season, and people were double or tripling their money just by selling their Michigan ticket. Like, though, for one game, students were buying tickets for $300, $400. And, the fans in the stadium, whether you're sitting all the way up in the upper bowl, or, your front row, that ticket is going to be double or triple what it normally is for any other game. So I think it's just funny where it's like people are going to spend, 600, $700 on a ticket just to get kicked out because
Yeah.
they want to pick a fight with
Or
an
go to
opposing
jail.
fan.
Like,
Right. Like I think that's just silly. And I think, yeah, like you were saying, like 90 to 95% of those MSU fans, like they just want to be there to watch a game. Yeah, they have that fire, or they have like an intensity to,
sure.
be part of the crowd and be part of, the game by, standing up or like screaming or whatever. So, but I don't think anyone's like intentionally out there to, hurt somebody. So I think that's just a little goofy. And I want to address a question in the chat
Sure.
of, will the students be able to handle a win over Michigan at night without tearing the city up? And I think my answer to that would be the fact that MSU and the city of East Lansing is still standing after 2021
Yeah.
should give you all you need to know about. I think it'll be all right, if they win, if MSU wins this season after. And I know what a night game entails, and I know how it may be different than a noon game, but the fact that MSU Michigan was a top 10 matchup, and Kenneth Walker had the 5 touchdowns and everything, and they came back down 16, I think,
Right.
and won. I think it will go crazy. There will be couches burned, and you know like drunk kids on the street all night, but I don't think that goes into why MSU hasn't had a night game with Michigan ever, or like in East Lansing. I don't think that's gone into it. I think that's kind of. I think it's funny. I think it's funny that people think that the whole city of East Lansing would burn down. Um, I mean, MSU is not, gonna. No one really thinks they're gonna be a top 10 team. I don't think they're gonna be a top 10 team heading into that game.
Sure.
Um, so it is going to be potentially unranked versus Michigan. Could be probably they're probably going to be top 3. I mean, you look at their schedule, it is a lot easier. MSU
Sure.
does have a more difficult schedule, and has you know 2 or 3 potential losses on that slate before they even get to Michigan, and that doesn't even include playing you know Ohio State and Penn State after. So I think, yeah, there's a lot that goes into that, and I do think the city would go crazy if Michigan State did win, but create violence and cause chaos. So
Sure.
yeah, that's kind of my take.
This is why I'm glad I have Aiden on like my team here. Just to have that unique experience of a Michigan State student who's still got some classes to finish up too, and just to give that
Right.
that perspective from the student section, from what like what goes on campus afterwards.
Mhm.
So that's why I'm glad Aiden's part of my team. But also I'm glad you brought up the 2021 game, because like you said, a top 10 matchup, both teams ranked in the top 10. That stadium was lit on fire in a good way, just intense, loud, and it was that way at the beginning, and then Michigan kind of creates that separation. Things got a little bit quieter, but nobody left. Third quarter, here comes the Spartans, chipping away, and that place just continued to intensify and intensify. And yeah, one of the best environments I've ever been in, maybe the best environment for a game like that, that I've been in. Comparable to what it was like in the big house the next year, just because on that in that game, Michigan had lost the previous year. They wanted to get Paul Bunyan back. And so there was an intensity to that game too. But just that 21 game, to your point, if none of this stuff went down in that environment, with so much on the line at the time, just I mean,
Right.
way beyond just the typical bragging rights for the state. I know things are a little bit different post tunnel incident. I get that. I get that
Yeah.
it's a
Yeah,
different
that's
vibe,
true.
but still, I don't think it's not gonna be Fight Club out there. It's just not. So that's kind of our reaction to Valenti's take. I get why he does it. He's good at what he does. He wouldn't have lasted this long in radio if he wasn't. And and I listen to a lot of his. I wouldn't say a lot, but like I listen to different subjects that he's talked about. He's good at what he does, but I feel like this was I don't want to say a calculated thing by him, but like he kind of knew he was going to get a rise, and that's kind of why he is good at what he does. Is because now he's got everybody talking about it. So, anything else, I guess, Aiden, with the rivalry talk that we heard at maybe bringing things back to Big Ten Media Days. I'll say with Mel Tucker, he kind of finished his spiel on Michigan, saying that since the day he got hired, number one, he's always heard about this game and how important it is. He also said that he's never shied away when talking about this game, and I can vouch for that too, because he from the get go, as long as I've been covering this team on the beat, um, anytime he's asked about Michigan, he doesn't give the typical, oh, it's another game. It's we take things one at a time. No, his answer is always that's the most important game on our schedule, and he reiterated that at Big Ten Media Days and said that as long as he's the head coach there, that will continue to be the case, and it certainly was the case during the Mark Tantonio era as well. We do have a clip of Mel Tucker's answers towards Michigan when he's asked different questions on our YouTube channel. You can go check it out. It's a minute and a half. It's a quick little watch, but if you want to see everything that Mel Tucker said, it's all right there. And honestly, in all of his answers, Aiden, to the different questions he got about Michigan, I was kind of like nodding my head. I was like, yep, dude gets it, So, any reaction, I guess, to what specific things that Mel said?
No, I mean, if we want to pass the Michigan stuff, I think the quarterback talk that he said was interesting. I mean, he did talk about Noah Kim. He wasn't specifically asked about Caden Hauser,
No, he wasn't.
but someone did ask him specifically about Kim, and he gave his thoughts about what he liked about him and kind of laid out what Michigan State is looking for in a quarterback and said that he has all the tools that MSU is looking for in this QB competition. And I know I said last week that I think, Hauser is the guy to win the job, and I still believe it's his job to lose. In
Okay.
a way, I still believe it's his job to lose, but I do think Noah Kim will be the starter. So what I mean by that is I think, it's his job to lose because, he is a Tucker recruit.
Okay.
He is a younger player. He does have like a more talented pedigree. So he has all the intangibles, I guess, that you're looking for in a quarterback kind of to lead your program. And, I've talked about in articles and kind of in the podcast that we are ending the transition period for Michigan State and the Mel Tucker, the transition period from D'Antonio to Tucker is ending. So, this could be, I guess, the seal if Hauser is the starter rather than Kim. And so I do think, again, it is his job to lose, but I am leaning more towards now that Kim will be the starter from what I've heard and kind of how Tucker spoke so highly of him in media day and kind of what I heard from Mosley and Duplain.
Okay. Yeah. it was interesting. I'm going to answer Keys to Wisdom questions real quick. I do believe, yeah, alcohol sales are going to occur this year at Spartan Stadium. Um, so I think that's going to be part of the game day experience in East Lansing this year. Just to give that question answer. Yeah, so it was kind of a strange thing with the whole quarterback talk at Big Ten Media Days because I expected Tucker to get questions. Trey Mosley got questions about the quarterbacks, and it was I don't want to say eerie because that's not the right word, but it was strange that Caden Hauser's name did not come up very much. And I think a lot of that came from just the questions that were asked. To your point, I don't think it was Mel ignoring Caden Hauser. I don't think it was the players ignoring Caden Hauser. I just think that uh, Mel was asked directly about Noah Kim up on the podium, and then later on in like the breakout interview sessions, he was asked specifically about Sam Leavitt, who's the incoming true freshman, and Caden Hauser just kind of got lost in all of that. And so I do find that interesting. I think maybe the point you're trying to make, as far as it's Hauser's job to lose, is um, all the ingredients are kind of there for Caden Hauser to seize the job. I think is that's kind of what you're saying.
Yeah.
There's the fact that there's no incumbent starter anymore. Noah Kim, yeah, has been there for 3 years, but he's thrown 19, 20 passes in his career so far. So there's not a huge experience gap to overcome for a younger, um, quote unquote, more highly thought of prospect and things like that.
Hmm.
Um, but at the same time, I do agree with you. I think on the last show that we had, I kind of set my rangefinder at I was kind of leaning like 55-45 towards Noah Kim going into fall camp. After Big Ten Media Days, I would say that has gone now to maybe like a 60-40, 65-35 towards Noah Kim. And that's just based on, again, how Tucker talked about Kim, which was a glowing review of Noah Kim. He also changed his number from 14 to 10, which was the number that Peyton Thorne wore last year. I don't know if I should be reading much into that or not, but that it did happen. So yeah, I'm more confident now that I do think it's going to be Noah Kim. But Tucker also said when he was asked about the quarterbacks that it was a three-man race. He included Sam Leavitt
Right.
in there, which
Right.
I think that's probably coach speak. Like I'm not trying to call Mel Tucker a liar or anything like that. I'm just saying that Mel talked about when they recruited Sam that one of Sam's things was he wanted the opportunity to come in and compete for the job right away. And so that's probably part of this. Um, I think that with the transfer portal and how that works, like you want to give players every opportunity to earn the job and to keep players satisfied. So I think that's a lot of that answer from Tucker about Sam Leavitt being part of the race. Nobody expects Sam Leavitt to come in here as a true freshman and win the job. I don't think that's going to happen. Um, but it was cool to see, or it was nice to get a little insight on how Sam's early development is going in East Lansing, and he just arrived on campus in June, so it's all very new to him.
Right.
Um, yeah, I guess that's kind of my thoughts on that. And it does sound like Noah Kim. I was surprised when Mel Tucker said that Noah Kim was one of the 20 fastest players on the team. That kind of perked my ears up a little bit, and it made me wonder: is Jay Johnson maybe going to utilize the quarterback run a little bit more in the scheme, and how like you've got maybe more of an X's and O's football mind than I do. So it being a coach and things like that. So how do you, based on what you've seen from Michigan State's offense the last couple of years under Jay Johnson, seeing what they were able to do in 2021 with Peyton Thorne's mobility before he got banged up last year, how do you think they can incorporate Kim's legs or any of the quarterback's legs into the offense a little bit more?
Yeah, it can. I mean, you can change that up a lot. I mean, you can really put a defense on their heels the whole game doing that. I mean, you saw last year how Thorne being hurt made them more one dimensional, and now you know that. I'm not even thinking about how like the run game and how the running back and the offensive line situation was last year compared to 2021. I mean, just looking at yeah, like that lack of mobility has hurt the whole team a lot, and you saw that. So I think, Jay Johnson would ideally want somebody, like Kim, who is one of the if he is one of the 20 fastest players on the team, I think that's definitely a big bonus and, could impact a starting job. I mean, I don't know. I don't know if they're gonna look that deep into it, because there are a lot of different intangibles that go into that battle, for quarterbacks. So, keeping all those doors open. But yeah, him being the fastest definitely can it could be a determining factor, and I think that definitely helps with, changing your offense up too, because you did see Peyton Thorne in 2021, sometimes with the threat of Kenneth Walker, he was able to
Right.
pull it because, he was able to pull it and run for, you know, first downs and, touchdowns because that threat of having Kenneth Walker and having a sound and strong run game. I mean, they're getting back to that. I know JD Duplain, someone asked him about his goals and the offensive line goals for this season, and he said they want a 100-yard rusher every game, and that's not 100 yards total. That's one player getting 100 yards rushing or more. So I think the whole team is kind of on board with that, and I think somebody, the quarterback, whoever it may be, will be on board with, having the opportunity to run and use their legs, and be, balance not only the run and the pass, but balance the run and the workload between the running backs and the quarterback.
Right, like a lot of what Jay Johnson tries to do with Michigan State too is it's very play action based, and we saw that a ton in 2021 with Kenneth Walker because teams had to, respect him so much. That's what Michigan State wants to get back to. Like, I don't think they expect, like, nobody expects Nathan Carter or Jalen Berger to be Kenneth Walker 2.0, but you have to make it a consistent threat and something that the defense has to respect so that it does set up those deep shots and it does set up play action. And if you can take that, if you can establish the run game and become multifaceted in your attack, then you throw in the read option on top of that, where you're reading guys on and either pulling it or giving it. Like that's just another wrinkle, another way to put defenses in conflict. And so, yeah, I'm intrigued by that, and it's going to come down to how much Michigan State has improved as a run blocking unit, both the offensive line and the tight ends. Um, Receivers, I know Jaden Reed was a very good blocking receiver, like blocking downfield. So you've got to replace that now with him off to the NFL. So I'm interested to see how it all comes together. Um, there was a lot of optimism around media days. There usually is. Like let's not kid ourselves. They're usually going into a season. There is a lot of optimism, but I don't think it didn't sound to me like Mel Tucker was trying to sell anybody on anything. It was just kind of this is what my perspective is. This is what I believe. And with that, I'm going to get into Cameron McGregor's question. I think it's a little tongue in cheek, the question, but Mel Tucker did say that he thought this was the most talented team that he's had. Um, I don't think that means I'm not going to put words in Mel Tucker's mouth. Let me back up a little bit. I don't believe I believe that this is Mel Tucker's most talented team, like deepest team. Um, I don't think they're going to go 11-2. I think the difference, obviously, between that team and this team is Kenneth Walker was so good uh, that he carried Michigan State to multiple wins that they do not get if he's not on the roster. There's a difference between having one guy who is uber talented, an All American, Doak Walker Award winner, and then having a two deep in the defensive line rotation where you can go four defensive tackles, four defensive ends, and have that rotation and keep guys fresh. And then in the linebackers, you go Ma Gayatote and Cal Halliday, Jacoby Winmond, Aaron Boulay is kind of an edge guy. He can play maybe either spot. having that depth there. The secondary obviously is still a question mark, but like I think that's what Tucker's referring to, like the added depth that they have at the offensive line. So when Mel Tucker says this is the most talented team he has, I'm thinking he's talking about the depth chart as a whole and the ability to endure injuries. Like we found out very quickly last year that Michigan State could not endure the type of injuries that they suffered early on last season. It devastated the team. It went completely off the rails when they lost Darius Snow, Xavier Henderson, Jacob Slade. Jaden Reed was out for a game and a half with his back. And we found out very quickly that the depth was not there to be able to overcome those losses. I think Michigan State's in a better position this year with the added depth that they have through the transfer portal. Now with 3 high school recruiting classes in under Tucker, I think that's what he's referring to there. Um, any thoughts on that, Aiden? I guess I kind of took that and ran with it, but
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it is kind of more top to bottom in terms of talent than it is top heavy talent. I know a lot of coaches who talk about, teams, whether it's, high school, college, NFL, where teams that's, you have your top 3 to 5 guys on the field, and some teams like MSU last year could match pretty much every other team they played, probably besides, Ohio State, or Michigan, in terms of the top 3 or 5 guys they have on offense versus the top 3 or 5 guys the teams they play on defense. But it's more about, the 6 through 11, right? So, that worst player who's, starting that 11th best player on the field, is he better? Is he way better than last season? And is the gap between your best player on the field and your worst player on the field, is that smaller? Because, you saw that last year where you have players like Keon Coleman and Jaden Reed, and that, maybe the worst player on your field, is that gap is wide. Obviously Kenneth Walker, that's a pretty wide gap. But when, you have the worst player on the field is improved and developed, and, like your worst starter is, close in that gap to your best starter, that I think that's what he's talking about in terms of talent and the added depth.
right. And with that, I'll answer a keys to wisdom question. I think he's referring to Malik Carr calling me out on Twitter last week. No, Malik was not one of the players invited to Big Ten Media Days. And even if he was, I'm sure he doesn't know who I am. And he probably gets a lot of trolls on Twitter as it is. And not to say that I'm a troll, because I wasn't trying to troll him in any way, shape, or form. But he wouldn't have recognized me. But appreciate you remembering from last show, Keys to Wisdom. Yeah, sticking with this theme kind of about the depth on Michigan State's roster. We hinted at it earlier. Just Mel Tucker was very bullish on especially the defensive line, just the amount of size that they've added to the defensive line this offseason. When you add a guy like Jalen Sammy from Colorado, who is over 300 pounds, big, strong, almost immovable object type player. You add Tunmis Adele, who is going to be a defensive end, but still a bigger guy who can also run like a deer and get to the sideline and help set the edge. You add, who else did they add in the middle defensive line? Aiden, help me out here.
I mean, a lot of freshmen. They
A
added a
lot of
lot of
freshmen,
freshmen.
yeah.
Yeah.
But also, bringing back guys like Simeon Barrow and who's the guy who jumped out last year? I'm
Yeah,
drawing a
Derek
blank here.
Harmon.
Derek Harmon is another guy
Yeah.
who kind of burst onto the scene last year. I I think Michigan State is going to be more stout in the middle of its defense. I
Mhm.
think up the middle, they're in really good shape between Sammy, Derek Harmon. Maverick Hansen got a lot of run last year. Simeon Barrow can rotate in there, and then linebacker spot. As far as stopping the run, Cal Halliday is a run stuffer. Jacoby Winmon moving maybe back to from defensive end to linebacker. That's going to be strong up the middle. And then even the safeties. I know they're young, but um, Jaden Mangum and Malik Spencer potentially being the starters back there. I think up the middle, Michigan State's in a pretty good spot. And on the edges, I like Michigan State's edge talent. Um, Obviously, cornerbacks have a lot to prove that this year, and that's something that's been a theme throughout. I mean, even before let's be honest, before Mel Tucker even got here, Michigan State's defensive backs were not what it was in the peak of the Mark D'Antonio era. Not close. That decline started in the years before Mel Tucker got here too. So, but strictly speaking, the front seven and up the middle, I think Michigan State's in a really good spot. Um, any thoughts there, Aiden?
No, definitely. I think, Mel Tucker addressed kind of where Timmy Sedele's position was because people did think, at 6'5", 280, or however big he is, was he going to play more interior or out? And, he said he's going to be an edge guy and, potential passing down packages. He could move interior, but he is going to be an edge rusher for now and end. And then, he did talk about when he was on the main stage, he did talk about the depth at linebacker, and along with Jacoby Windman and Cal Halliday, he did also name drop Jordan Hall and Ma'a Ote,
Yep.
which kind of shows how, Ma'a has developed and potentially has more opportunity to play, with how well Windman played at, on the edge last season. And then also, what they get in Jordan Hall, because, even going back to the spring practice that was open to all the fans, he was a guy that was really popping out. And, obviously coaches have noticed that, and they know better than us what they have with him, and he could be a big player in the this upcoming season.
Right, and it should be exciting for Michigan State fans to hear Ma'a's name come up because this is a former four-star kid who has kind of been, I don't want to say forgotten about, but like he hasn't gotten his opportunity on the field. And so when you take a kid who obviously had a lot of athleticism and talent coming out of high school, if you're rated as a four-star kid, and we might get our first look at him in a more prominent role on the field this season. And if he can help Michigan State with that, sideline to sideline mobility, helping the linebackers in the pass defense, which they really struggled at last year, both Cal Halliday and Jacoby Winmon, once he was moved back to linebacker, they both struggled kind of in open space. So maybe Ma is one of those guys who can stick with a tight end, can stick with a running back out of the backfield. We'll find out. But and a guy that was once in the transfer portal and considered leaving, and then ultimately came back. So a benefit of that. And so yeah, that was definitely a name that stood out just because we haven't heard his name much over the last couple of years, other than when he entered the transfer portal and came out. So I think there's something to be encouraged about there. As always, if you guys have any questions about what we saw at media days, and questions about the guys who were there, Trey Mosley, JD Duplain, Cal Halliday, you go ahead and drop those in the comment section. We'll answer as many of those as we can. Where do you want to take this now, Aiden? We got probably another 15, 20 minutes here. Was there a topic that came out of either media days or the lead up to it or social media that you want to kind of dig into? I'll pass you the ball here.
Um, not really. Honestly, I think media day there was a lot to talk about with just the direction of this program. And I think one thing I did leave out that I did want to say is all the players and Tucker both said how talented last season's team was. And while this team does seem, Tucker has talked about how much more talented and how much more depth this current team is. Everyone talked about how talented last season's team was, but it just, the pieces weren't there. There were injuries. I think, Mosley talked about complacency and there was inconsistency there. And everyone kind of seemed to have a different answer as to why last year they went 5-7 and it didn't click, but they all had the same answers about how it is going to click this year and how, they all have the same answers about how they're going to improve and they're being on the same page. I know they talked a lot about the team bonding and that they've done more
Yeah.
team bonding outside of football this season and that they did, dodgeball and, Duplain was boasting a lot about how good he was at putt putt golf. And I know the quarterbacks themselves have done, actual golfing competitions and stuff. So there's just a lot of, you know, team bonding outside of that. And they talked about how important that was with the transfer portal. And I think that that goes into kind of, the Northwestern stuff where, they were asked about the hazing and what the hazing stuff and if the program should be worried about any potential hazing. And Tucker talked about there's, anti-hazing policy at MSU, and none of the players were really worried about that. And you can tell that you can tell there really isn't any of that going on because of the amount of team bonding and how, the players speak of each other and how highly they speak of each other. And, there's a whole level of respect that, there isn't a worry that something like that is going on at MSU. So that, I mean, that was a big topic. I do remember, after MSU went and we were kind of winding down, there was still more coaches going on, and the crowd for Ryan Day was very huge, but
Yeah.
the crowd for David Braun, the interim for Northwestern, was very huge. I know, he's not walking into the most ideal situation, and that was kind of all the questions were being thrown at him all day were about, where do you go from here and kind of how he's handling the situation. And I do not envy him whatsoever.
No.
But I also applaud him for the way he handled himself at media day, because that he was throwing a lot at him. And I think, MSU, you could tell there was a comfort level of, that's not going on at all at MSU. And I think, that's a good thing, whether it's MSU or any school.
Yeah, no, just I agree with you what you said, the variety of the topics like yeah, the Northwestern stuff. The second day, Aiden took off after day one because that's when most of Michigan State stuff was there. But the second day, um, I talked to an insider from Northwestern and asked for her opinion on, the stuff with Fitzgerald and, what was going on. And she kind of gave her perspective on things, being someone who's plugged in there. And yeah, it's an unfortunate situation. I told her like that's an impossible job for the interim coach to walk into. Even with like low expectations coming off a 1-11 season last year, and you throw that circumstance in there, and it's just a tough situation to walk into. I do want to address. We talked not to completely go all the way back into the Michigan State rivalry talk, but I do want to address one of the things that one of the stories that popped up this week, which was the Jim Harbaugh potential suspension. And so to touch on that a little bit, and then also Jim Harbaugh's comments about mutual respect between Michigan State and Michigan. I'm gonna touch on that a little bit too. So first off, for those who don't know, it does sound like Michigan and the NCAA are kind of negotiating a potential punishment for Harbaugh after the um, minor recruiting violations that occurred, but then after Michigan was provided with a notice of allegations, it was alleged by the NCAA that Jim Harbaugh lied about his knowledge of what had gone on. So that's where we're at now with the whole punishment for the alleged false statements, to use the legal terms that the NCAA used, and so that's where that kind of comes from. This isn't a huge. If it does end up being 4 games, Michigan played their cards right there because they open with East Carolina and UNLV and Rutgers, and who's the other non-conference game? Some other not good team. So
Yeah.
it's not going to matter one way or the other, the suspension. Um, and but I think the more interesting thing was, like Mel Tucker, Jim Harbaugh was asked about the state of the rivalry and what he expected from that game, and he called for mutual respect between the two programs, and he said that he and his program does respect Michigan State. Think of that what you will. Again, I'm not in the business of calling coaches liars, but again, if you just look at the 2018 thing with Devin Bush and digging up the logo, like this isn't like one side has the stick and the other one's cowering. Like this is two programs that don't like each other, period, and they clash head to head every year. So I I'm I I I'm stuttering here, but I get what Harbaugh's saying as far as, yeah, in an ideal situation, there would be mutual respect. They'd meet on the field, they'd play the game, and then we'd both go home, and what happens on the field. That's just not reality, I don't think. You can respect your opponent. Like, I'm not calling for, again, not calling for more of what happened last year, anything close to that. But it would be nice to get to a place where the game is played, both teams duke it out. Maybe, and I like the chippiness on the field, but I think the year-round bickering, and it's not going to go anywhere as much as we talk about. It's not going to go anywhere, but the year-round bickering, it does get tiring. On Twitter, you can't post anything relating to the other fan base without it just turning into a cesspool, which is unfortunate. That speaks to where social media is at. When you give everybody a voice, the uh, the crap seems to rise to the top of the pile. So, um, yeah, just wanted to address that real quick. Uh, but again, going into this year, I expect it to be really intense. I expect it to be very emotional. Um, but I don't think we're going to see what we saw, anything close to what we saw last year with that. I'm kind of waiting a little bit because right now in East Lansing, there's an
I
event going on called
I
Thy
was gonna
Shadows.
say because I just saw it on Twitter. So
Okay, go ahead and take it because I hadn't seen it yet.
so yeah, so I guess this is a little groundbreaking news, but MSU has unveiled a black uniform
Okay.
for this upcoming season. I've not read any details yet. Um they said it's not going to be an alternate uniform, which I don't know what or yeah, I don't know what that means. So they'll be in the regular rotation, I'm guessing. And so I
Okay.
don't know what games that's going to be worn for,
Oh, they're
but
wearing this. They're wearing this on October 21st, right? A
maybe
night game
they
in the
go
rivalry game.
yeah, maybe that's what they're planning on. But there is all everything is changed. There's a black helmet, there's black pants, black shirt, jersey. So everything. I know fans have really been wanting that, and
Right.
personally, I'm a fan of kind of a black jersey. I'm a fan of that. So I have to look into more details. I've only seen a few pictures so far on Twitter, but I'm sure they will show promo and full details
There's a
soon enough, whether it's, in the next 5 minutes or, later tonight.
there's a reveal video that is on Twitter right now that Michigan State football just tweeted. Um, and so I just watched that as you kind of described it. But yeah, so though this is kind of some breaking news out of East Lansing, there's going to be a an all black uniform added to the rotation. They're not calling it an alternate uniform. It's just going to be one of the things that they turn to. I think Michigan State's done like 2 years ago for the 2021 game against Michigan. They wore all green, and they've featured an all white uniform combination for big road games in the past. So this is added to that rotation, something that the players I know are going to be really excited about. Future recruits are going to be really excited about. Like you said, the fans, a sizable portion of the fan base has been calling for a black alternate jersey combination in the past. Based on what I saw from the video, they look really good. Uh, I wasn't a huge fan of the bronze from the bronze uniforms from a few years ago, just because they incorporated bronze and black with the green. I just felt like there was too much going on there in the look. Whereas if they would have just done bronze and green, I think that would have been would have stood out a little bit better. But these look really good, just based on the video that I saw. I would encourage you guys to go check out that on Twitter or Facebook. I'm sure it's out there. I'm gonna, as soon as we're done here, I'm gonna write a story about it real quick and
Right.
get that out to the people. So yeah, early impressions are, and I'm a traditionalist, so the fact that I can sit on here and say I've seen these, they look really good. It means more than your average Joe, just because I typically enjoy sticking to the script when it comes to uniforms and things like that. But I think they did a really good job with these, and its fans were, I think, are really going to like what they see. So
Yeah. I mean, I'm kind of the opposite. I really like monochromatic, anything black, white, gray, kind of that stuff. I'm all for it. I know Ohio
okay,
State's wearing those gray uniforms.
I do
That
like
I mean,
those.
I like those. But yeah, this looks pretty good so far.
Yeah,
I mean, we'll have to see more details, but yeah, it looks pretty nice.
I like it's just it's one. I'm interested, like you said. I don't know when they're going to be wearing these,
Mhm.
but it almost makes perfect sense to debut these jerseys on October 21st, and the first night game at Spartan Stadium. 100 years of Spartan Stadium makes a lot of sense, man.
I would I would I would guess maybe the Washington game. I would
That's a
say
possibility.
Washington because I know Washington does have an alternate that's white and gold, and
Okay.
it's got some purple accents to it, but they have a white and gold uniform, and then obviously that is, an awkward time. It's a 5 o'clock game on
It
Peacock,
is.
which is a little weird, but that's MSU's kind of Big Ten on NBC debut, so that could be another potential game that I would think they would wear those for.
Yeah, I think that is an interesting dynamic because on the one hand, if you're debuting a new uniform, you want as many eyeballs as possible to see it. So is it the right time to do that on Peacock when you don't
Mm,
know what the viewership is going to be like? On one hand, the counter argument to that is like if you debut it against Michigan, it's less traditional. Like if you want to maintain the
right.
tradition of the green and white against the maize and blue, you wear the all greens or something that's a little bit more traditional. I don't know what they're going to do, but I think that's a good. Both of those options, I think, are really good options to debut these. Um, Washington just being such a big early season game. That was kind of where it was where things changed last year.
Right.
Michigan State came out last year, did handled business against two MAC opponents, and then you go over to Washington, you get hammered pretty good, and it's like, whoa, where did that come from? And then we saw
Mm,
what happened. There's no doubt that this year's Washington game, you want to flip that script and be like, hey, now Michigan State came out of nowhere and upset Washington. How good could this team be? So it's got that circle around it there. So yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing these for the first time in live in front of our eyes and on television and things like that. So yeah, just a cool reveal by Michigan State during a big recruiting weekend with Spartan Dog Con going on right now. It's unofficial visit weekend, but a lot of kids are there with old former players. being there. So a really good job by athletic director Alan Haller and the team over there to make this weekend really jump out to those guys. There's a question here from Dave Chapman. Where do we have an advantage against Michigan on the field? Good question. Position groups. That is a good question, just because I do think this Michigan team is really deep, and I'm not trying to I'm not going to undersell Michigan State or Michigan here, but I do think Michigan is really deep at multiple positions. I don't know if there's an advantage. I'll be honest. I do think Michigan State is going to be better equipped to stop the run this year than they were a year ago, assuming that they are healthier and up front and things like that. So I do think Michigan State is going to be in a better spot to stop the run, to make Michigan. And even last year, as bad as last year was, Michigan State really bowed up in the red zone and forced, I think, 5 field goals out of Michigan. So, but between the 20s is where Michigan State really struggled even last year's game. So, yeah, if you can limit the damage of Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards, between the tackles, and get Michigan into some obvious passing downs, that's where you can make something happen there. But I'm not gonna shortchange anybody. Like there's not a position group that I can point to and say, oh yeah, Michigan State's better here, just because again, Michigan's rolling pretty good right now and at multiple positions. So
yeah, I mean, I think that's true. I think there's not really a position that sticks out where you're like, okay, I can see MSU have a clear advantage. I think Michigan is, yeah, like you said, they're definitely very deep. And while MSU, this feels like the most talented team that MSU has had, or, Tucker has said that this is the most talented team MSU's had. Michigan's coming off to back playoff appearances and winning the conference back to back. So while this MSU team may be good and in terms of talent and production may be better, Michigan is, and they're on a different level right now. But I will say, as Michigan State, I think all Michigan State fans know this. When that game happens, all the records are thrown out the window. Like all of that it's thrown out the window. So it's it is, last year I think Michigan's talent did carry them to that win last season,
sure.
because there was a clear disconnect, or there was a massive gap. But I think if Michigan State is healthy this year, I think that'll be a little bit closer.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that. I think it's a cliche to say throw the records out for this game, but it's just lived up to that over the last as far as like even teams when Michigan State hasn't been like a top 10 team or something like that, they still give Michigan a battle most weeks. Um, you think back to the rain game in 2017. I think that Michigan team at that time was undefeated coming into that game, and Michigan State upsets them in Ann Arbor in the monsoon. The rain's coming down. John O'Corn's trying to throw the ball in a hurricane like conditions. It seems like it just so that game comes to mind. So yeah, this is I'm just so ready for football, man. Like
Right.
we're with it. We're
I
like
know.
30, 36, 35 days away. And I can't wait to get there. I think fall camp starts next week for Michigan State. I think Tucker will have a press conference and it'll get launched and we're getting so close. So looking forward to it. Any other final thoughts, Aiden, before we get out of here, so I can get a story up on these uniforms?
No, I mean, I'm just excited for the season to be here. No, I mean, even the Central Michigan game, obviously, like I want to be in the stadium for that. But even like the week 0 games, like I don't even
Oh yeah,
care who's playing. Like I don't care if it's, you know, Hawaii versus,
Vanderbilt.
Cal. Yeah, it could be anyone. I'm just ready for the season to the season to start.
Yeah, my best friend is a Notre Dame fan, and we already have his daughter has her birthday party on August 26th,
Mm.
uh, for again birthday party, and we've already made plans to record the Notre Dame Navy game in week 0 and watch it after his daughter's birthday party. I'm going to be over there helping them clean up stuff and things so we can get, we can celebrate his daughter's birthday. I think it's going to be her 4th birthday, so we'll celebrate that and all that jazz. But then when that's done, we get things packed up and clean, say goodbye to the guests, and we're turning on Notre Dame Navy over in Ireland.
That's
So looking
awesome.
forward to it. Can't wait for it. Thank you guys as always for joining us. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. It really does help us out. Follow us on Twitter. I got our ads up there right now. All of that, just the more interaction we get, the better it does for us, and it allows us to continue to bring you guys coverage for absolutely no cost. And so, as always, we appreciate you guys, and have a good one. We'll see you next time.